you
Hi.
today?
Well, I'm good. I'm good. We had a thunderstorm for the ages last night. Um, I
Ooh.
think all of New England heard this one that came ripping through here. It somehow my kids just sleep right through it, but it definitely affected my sleep. So still got to the gym, still ready to bring you guys a great show here on Friday. Anybody have anything happen over the last 24 that you just got to get out on the table and talk about here? Steve, what do you got?
So I have a buyer. We've been touring like a dozen homes a week. We keep on losing. FHA, close to max budget. Well, we get this house in Chicopee. We have an offer. We think we're the only one. We get a message late at that night that there's another offer on the table. And the next day, it seems like it's doom and gloom. The listing agent tells me that the sellers are a little worried about an appraisal gap because we need, you know, 3% in closing costs. And I reached out to Eric from Semper and said, "Hey, is there anything we can do?" He immediately got in touch with his, appraisers and said, "Hey, here's the situation. Here's the price point. Do you think we can, hit X amount on this? Is there going to be any issues?" They ran some comps. They're like, "I don't see any issue whatsoever." I was able to share that with the listing agent and say, "Hey, listen, this is what my lender, is telling me. His appraiser saying this, like they think we're good to go. There's not an issue." And then lo and behold, we got the offer accepted and we're under agreement. And
Love
and
it.
the guy really, said, "Hey, listen, like we were worried about the other one, but within 5 minutes, I got on the horn with Eric. He got me that, and he was like, wow." And I told him, I said, "This is how my team works. If there's an issue, if there's a way, we're gonna figure it out." And that was the difference between the other one that was very similar to ours and us showing, what our team can do. And it got us under agreement versus the other one. The guy was like really impressed by it. And so kudos to Eric and, his guy. And I really appreciate that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Eric, I don't know if you want to add any color to it or, hey, this is how this one
Yeah,
worked,
no,
but
I'm actually happy I logged in right at the right time there. I've got, hey, I did all that with a broken phone. That's why I can't do any video right now. I got a new phone being delivered today, so I did all this with a broken phone.
yeah. Anything kind of just,
Yeah, I
hey,
mean,
we did
I
this
think
on this. I've done it this way on others. Like, hey, here, just maybe throw out some other scenarios where these guys should be leaning on you for stuff like this.
I think the biggest thing is communication. And me and you always talk about that,
Yep.
Steve. You know what I mean? You've been doing this a long time, and you always say it. I always say it. Pick up the phone, make a call, send a text, whatever it is. Let's communicate. Let's work back and forth, and let's see what we can do to help each other. That's the biggest thing. It's not we didn't do anything magical there. Steve was up against the wall and he wasn't getting his offer accepted, and he reached out. That's all he did. That's all he really did. He reached out. He said, "Hey, Eric, here's where we're at. Here's why they're not accepting my offer. What can we do?"
Yep.
And I picked up the phone. I called the appraiser. "Hey, what do you think? Here's the address." And,
Yep.
and the appraiser actually sent us some comps, which I shared with Steve. "Hey, here's some house sales in the neighborhood. Make everybody feel good. Let's move forward." It was all communication. That's all it was.
Yeah, and I do think that is the solution a lot of the time. Working with an experienced group. This is why your preferreds, your attorneys, your lenders, your home inspectors, matter. I think we've got a great group that we push here on our team, and I've been doing it long enough to know that more often than not, things like this are happening when you use the right people. So thanks for sharing, Steve. Anybody else have something going good in their world, maybe something bad in their world on a real estate transaction? Linda, what do you got?
So Jeff and I had a really cool interaction. We have a new listing out on Lido Key, and two weekends ago, a gentleman stopped by and he ended up staying quite a while. And it turns out he has been a lifelong investor. He has over 50 rental properties up on the East Coast. And he has stuff down in Florida. And in addition to real estate, he likes to buy 7-Elevens and all this other stuff. Anyway, he was wonderful. And he's got a condo, and I guess he found one in his building that is a corner unit that he likes better. And so he said he's thinking about selling his place. And so then he said to us, so, what are you charging for commission? And Jeffrey gave him the breakdown. Well, here's what we charge as list agents. And then here are the options that you would have with respect to offering cooperating compensation. And the man looked at him and he said, you are the first realtor to explain this to me in accordance with the new rules. He said, everybody else I talked to has been saying, well, I charge 6% or I charge, whatever their number is that they're throwing out to him. And he said, I love that you understand this and you're explaining it to the consumer properly. So, okay, so fast forward to yesterday, I get a call from this gentleman. He's like, yeah, I really like you guys. I want you to come over and look at my place.
Yeah, I mean,
Just
I
from
love
having
this.
an
Yeah,
honest
I love this story
communication.
though for so many reasons. I feel like sometimes in this job, especially like I think open houses, maybe you got one that's going a little slow and you're kind of mailing it in. You got there late, you didn't bring food, there's no music, you don't have anything to drink. You just kind of threw it together. And it's really, you know, it is your trial run. It is your audition for people that are walking through the door to potentially sell their properties because you don't know who's got properties to sell and you don't know who's coming through that door that also could just use you as a buyer's agent. So, when we started to push the concept of a mega open house and going all in on these things, it really made a lot of sense to me that's really what that is. It's an audition. And an extension of that is like just in general, when you're going around and you're talking to people, right? You have no idea what you're saying, at the beginning of a conversation, how that might affect whether they're even going to tell you that they're thinking about buying or selling, right? If you're talking real estate and the words that are coming out of your mouth sound like you don't know what you're talking about, they might not mention that you know what? I was thinking about doing a 1031, or I was thinking about doing an investment property, or we were thinking about doing this. But if you can speak intelligently, then all of a sudden they start to go, oh, you know what? Let me just pick your brain on this. So I just think it's really important and that's another reason why we're doing this, right? We're doing these calls so that we can talk through all these little scenarios that you guys have the knowledge that when you're in just a 5-second, 10-second quick, it sounds like it's just, banter just back and forth. You're at a dinner party or something, but absolutely the pros can listen for a little something here or there, maybe ask a couple of extra questions, and all of a sudden we're talking about turning this person into a client. So, yeah, I love it, and I know how professional you guys are, and I love when those auditions go so well for you, and people are coming back and doing business with you. So thanks for sharing, and it just opens up the opportunity to talk about how we are always, in an audition, right? Every conversation that you're having. Be aware who you're talking to. You never know, and don't judge a book by its cover. Some of the most wealthy people will not show their wealth. I almost feel like the wealthier the person looks like, probably the more in debt they are. They're trying to show and they're trying to prove, they're trying to gain status. And I feel like, some of the wealthier people that I've met, there is zero flash to them. And I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but it's like they don't have to earn status because that's what it all is. That's what the BMW is. It's status, right? There's data out there that shows that the Toyota or the Hyundai or whatever can hit a lot of the same specs that the BMW or the Mercedes can. for speed, comfort, luxury. I was listening to a podcast the other day that said like a high end, Toyota or Hyundai is going to outperform, for the luxury, the feel, a low or mid on a luxury car. But you're buying the luxury car to prove to somebody because of something that happened in your childhood, something that happened in your early, developmental years, something that you feel like you've got to prove or you got to show or, So it's just interesting that the tricks that the mind can play. Linda, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. To your point, this gentleman, he rolled up in like I don't even know how old of a Chrysler. I mean, and he looked like he kind of rolled out of a drawer. You know what I mean? And just disheveled, and I mean, there was just nothing pretentious or he didn't care. You know what I mean? And but he was wonderful, and he was so willing to share information. He was just such a lovely person, but you would never in a million years dream that he had built the kind of this huge wall of wealth that he has for himself. It was very cool. And he was so proud of himself because he's paying for all of his grandchildren's college educations, which, and you know what? And that's what the money's for. That's so beautiful, right? So he was just delightful. So it was very cool.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'll tell you a story. We were chit-chatting in the office the other day, and one of our agents got a lead and set an appointment and is supposed to meet the person, and the person doesn't show up. And so she's pretty frustrated. You get ghosted, and that happens. It's part of the job. And so, but the person reached back out and apologized profusely, which is also a lot of times like part of like one of these scams or something where they reach back out and they say, sorry, I couldn't make it, but my car broke down or I lost my phone or, some story. And then they're going to say, but if you could, whatever, wire me money, or you could, I don't know which direction they're going to go, but they're going to try and do some sort of a scam. And in this particular case, the individual apologized and said, no, I want to reschedule tomorrow and I'll sign a buyer's contract. And so the agent goes out to the next day, sets an appointment to show the property, and gets out there, and it's a 2:30 appointment, and 2:40 rolls around and they're not there. And she's, oh my God, guy's doing it again. This is a hoax or whatever. And then lo and behold, the buyer pulls up on an electric scooter. He lives a few streets over, pulls up in an electric scooter. Oh, Dan. And turns out is paying all cash. So you just never know. The goal is go meet people, have conversations, learn a little bit, and see where you can go with it. So, yeah. Who else has got something? We might turn it over to the finance guys. Maybe Eric and Dan, maybe you guys can kind of speak on the back end of what you guys see on these applications. And I don't know.
I'll just echo what we always say is communication. I don't have answers yet. As soon as we get off this call, I'm actually going to go through the file. But Romani had a deal yesterday she was having issues with. She called me up. And we did a 3-way call with the buyer. And the three of us just had a chat and said, all right, we're going to take a look at it. We're going to see if we can save it. You know what I mean? His bank turned him down, his local bank. So we'll have answers after the call. But again, I always echo, it doesn't matter if it happens or it doesn't. It's all about communication. We gotta keep on, pick up the phone, give us a call, send a text. Hey, I got a question. That's the biggest thing I can just always echo every week is communication.
For sure.
Dan, what do you got? Dan?
I had a few situations this week actually where, similar kind of situation maybe Steve brought up in the earlier, not necessarily regarding value or stuff like that, but just a client that's been making offers and not getting it accepted, and they kind of toe the line and aren't willing to maybe offer a little more because they've been very sensitive on payment. and things like that. And maybe the agent wasn't quite communicating to me on the last offer that, hey, they didn't want to go any higher because they didn't want, any more on the payment. And then, I kind of come to find out, and I reach back out, hey, how'd that offer go? Oh, well, we didn't get it because we didn't go high enough. So I got back in touch with the client and kind of let them know we've got some other options to try to get that payment down, whether it was maybe looking to just do a simple discount on the rate to buy the rate down to get it down a little bit. But in this situation, what we ended up doing was to offer the client a 1 year, 1% buy down. So just a temporary buy down. I think we've talked about them here on this program before. But basically, we as the lender just put aside some money in escrow, say it saves them $250 a month on the payment. That's $3,000 over the course of that year. At closing, we put $3,000 aside in an escrow account for them. And then basically they make a discounted payment by $250 a month for the first year. And doing that made the client comfortable enough to be able to go that extra step on the next property, offer a little bit more, and still get a payment that they're comfortable with, while they're still getting, today's 30-year fixed rate as it is, but just getting that temporary, rate 1% off on the first year. And actually I had that come up in two different scenarios pretty similar this week, where our client went with that option, and we were able to get a deal done.
Are you guys seeing anybody look at, with the rate environment, to look at ARMs? Is that happening at all?
I'll touch base on the arms. I've had a couple people ask about them. I will never tell somebody it's a good idea. And here's the reason. I know you've been in this as long as me, Steve. Remember during COVID, everybody was all arm crazy. 2020, 2021. Well, guess what their 5-year arms are going to do right now? They're going to adjust. They're going to adjust by 1%. And there's no shot of them refining right now, because they all grabbed a 2 or 3% arm, and they're going to adjust 1%, which is still 3% lower than today's rates. But these people borrowed $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. 1% is going to be $400 or $500. It's come and due right now for these people who thought, let me grab a 1% lower rate by doing an arm, and within the next 5 years I'll refi, it'll be fine. And it's not going to be fine for them. So I'll never tell people to take an arm personally. There's just too much risk for that $200 a month savings. Now all of a sudden they're going to get hit with a $400 or $500 increase. It's not worth it to me.
Dan, you kind of feeling the same way?
I think in the market right now, there's not a big enough difference between the rates that you can get on a fixed rate and on an arm rate, for the most part, that would justify doing it. Even if you have somebody that says, oh, I only intend to be in this home for a few years and then I'm going to probably move, there's always the potential that you do stay there. And to do it for, like Eric said, maybe 1% off. And I think right now, to be honest, the difference in the rate isn't even quite that much for like a 5-year arm, and like a regular fixed rate. Now, some banks out there, like savings banks and stuff, that portfolio those loans. In some cases, you might have some banks that will do like a 10-year arm at something that's a lot cheaper than a 30-year fixed. Not very often, but sometimes you'll see that. And I mean, if that were the scenario, they're getting a 10-year fixed rate, but for the most part, the risk outweighs it, especially when there isn't as much of a rate savings to justify it.
And I don't know how much you guys, are paying attention to those, but is the spread pretty much always going to be around that 1%, or does, different rate environments, you've seen it? Hey, no, I've seen the spread be 1.5% or even 2% on ARM to a 30-year.
Yeah. Or we'll see it the other way, where it's even closer, like even less than 1%. which is kind of where when we see a spike in rates, the banks, for the most part, it's them trying to discourage lenders or borrowers from taking those arm rates, and they price them like shit basically. So when you see that, it's kind of them really trying to kind of push everybody to a fixed rate.
And Guy, let's not forget that, like, anytime these people, are out there and you see these advertisements on the web or whatever, these are usually designed for like the cream of the crop. 30% down, perfect credit, perfect income, all those things. So sometimes people go on the internet and they just see numbers, but it doesn't mean that it helps their scenario.
Anybody have any other finance questions? Mortgage product questions? Anything going on a financing side of the world on one of your transactions that we might want to chat about? Just out of curiosity, Eric and Dan, how often are the agents reaching out to you and asking you guys to call listing agents to explain to the listing agent how solid the buyer is? Are our agents doing that? And I just believe that can be a difference maker. And my intuition says they're not reaching out to you guys and asking you to do that, but I'm just curious.
Here and there, I'll get that request, not consistently as we'd like it to be, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, guys, if you're not
yeah.
asking your lenders, to reach out when the lender has done all the work, right? One of the pain points of using, a preferred like Semper is they're going to ask for more docs up front. And so, but the beauty of asking for more docs up front is that we now know that we've got a solid buyer, right? And so now it becomes much easier to communicate, right? So that call from the lender, if it's you and two other offers, right? What I'm trying to plant the seed of is, hey, you know what? I'm going to have my lender give you a call because we're pretty much just waiting on appraisal with this, right? They've done a really good job. All the docs are in and we're solid. I know we're 1,000 or 2,000 short, but have you talked to the lender on the other two buyers? Have you heard from them? Well, I haven't, no, I don't usually do that. Hey, in this rate environment, I would talk to those lenders, right? So I'm trying to convince that listing agent that they should talk to those lenders, right? Because what if they call those lenders and the lender goes, Johnny, who made an offer? Because I can promise you a lot of times that's what's going on. They did a, really quick pre-approval and Johnny's got a pre-approval, but all the docs haven't been checked. Right. So
and at the very least,
go ahead, Dan.
At the very least, when you go to send that offer out, if you're sending it via email to the listing agent, to CC the loan officer, myself, or if you're working with Eric, to include us on that email communication, then we can see it as well. And I could pick up the phone and give that listing agent a call. And then I think even just having that in your email template that you send with your offer and you're explaining, hey, I've included the loan officer here. He's done a thorough pre-approval. Here's his cell phone number. Please give him a call if you have any questions.
I'd love to hear, and Romani, I see your hand up, but I'd love to hear from a heavy lister, somebody that's listed a bunch. Like, how realistic is it when you got 3 offers? Are you calling or making sure you talk to all those lenders? And be honest with me, hey, I most of the time I do, sometimes I don't. Here's a scenario where I don't. Linda.
Always.
Yeah.
Always, yeah.
Yeah. Right. If you're down to 3, I gotta talk to that lender. Right. If they're all damn close, I want to know. If I call the lender and he says, who are you asking about? Versus, the lender goes, now look, if you're a busy lender, you might not know their name off the top of their head. But if you're that busy, you should also be good with your CRM. You should be able to pull them up quick and say, oh, yep, Johnny, here's where he's at. Here's the docs that we have. But if there's zero relationship, they don't even know, right? And then I also want to know, how experienced is that lender? Because there is a difference, even with a preferred like Semper. If they just hired a new loan officer yesterday at Semper, as great as Semper might be, that's completely different from using experienced loan officers like Dan and Eric. It just is. It's no different than, are all realtors the same that work at your brokerage? They're not. So, hey, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been working with this client? Have they written any other offers? Have you collected all the documents? How many deals have you closed this year? How many have you lost? Like, just ask some questions. You're getting paid a lot of money to do this on the listing side. These are the questions. Anybody else just want to just chat on, from the listing side, what's going through your head as we're having this conversation, and what are you doing with those lenders? Linda, your
I can add
hand's,
some.
yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, just the one way to kind of approach that conversation a little bit softer is I just kind of play dumb and I say, hey, look, every bank, every lender's got a different pre-approval process, pre-qualification process. I've seen 1,000 different terms for it. What does yours look like, and what do you guys actually collect? Right, and just let them tell you what their process is, because there is a difference between a pre-approval and pre-qualification, but everyone's got a fancy name for it, right? I've heard lenders tell me, like, we just need an appraisal, pretty much. Or I've heard lenders say, we pulled the credit score, but we still need tax returns. So just let them tell you what their standard process is for pre-approval, and go from there.
What about softening up the experience conversation, Adam? I mean, there's a difference between, I just got into mortgage last year. Yeah, that's great. I work at a great, lending institution, but I started last year, right? But and there's a good answer to that too. Hey, you know what? Just like there is for a real estate agent. Yeah, I did just start, but I'm part of a team. That's the why I joined a team. There's not going to be a scenario that my team hasn't seen. And, I don't have as many deals on my plate, so I've got more time to look at this file, right? A professional can still answer the question the right way.
So I've never specifically come out and asked that question, but that's one of the benefits of, calling the lenders. You're going to know right away within the first 15 seconds if this person knows what the heck they're doing. And as all realtors and lenders like to say, a lot of times that just comes out in conversation, right? Hey, Adam, appreciate you calling. I've been doing this for 20 years, been doing this for 30 years. Realtors and lenders are proud of how long they've been in the business. So a lot of times they'll volunteer that information without you asking. I will say I've never specifically asked that question, but you can get an idea. And I also judge the lender, based on whether they pick up the phone or not too. That's always key as well.
Awesome. Who else? Linda, did you still have something to add, or you got a lingering hand?
No, I apologize.
Your hand lingers a lot, Linda. You got to get quicker on that trigger.
Okay, I'll work on it. Sorry.
Rumani, we didn't get to your question. What did you have?
I had a couple of buyers who all had pre-approvals with FHA, but they were looking for condos. And when there was time to put in an offer, I figured out that their loan, FHA, wouldn't fly for the condo. So I was wondering, for the first-time home buyers who are looking for condo, what are the things to look in the loan application or the pre-approval, or how should I kind of guide them, or what recommendations are there?
Well, the first thing is, and I don't know how up to date this is, but there is a website that'll tell you which condo complexes are approved or not for FHA. So that's the first place that I would start. I wouldn't even be showing properties that aren't on that list. And a lot of times I think you'll see in the description for the property, complex is FHA approved. And I know in recent years that these approvals have gone, complexes that were FHA approved are not anymore. So I think, Dan, you were going to step in, and I don't know how up to date those websites are. I would love to hear somebody comment on that. Hey, is that the be all end all? Are those websites, good? Maybe spot approvals are a thing that we could talk about.
Yeah, so definitely the FHA condo website that's like through HUD, which we can put that link out today, is definitely up to date. Also, like you had said, Steve, yes, a lot of condos, projects that had been FHA approved before and expire. Now, that right there creates an issue for those FHA spot approvals that you had mentioned. So, to kind of explain it all, you can do a spot approval on an FHA condo complex. There are many different requirements that the project has to meet. But even if it's not an FHA approved project, we can gather enough information to determine if we can do a spot approval. One of the complications that comes up when you're trying to do that with a place that's already been FHA approved specifically is that on a spot approval, there can only be, I'll double check, but I want to say 10% concentration of FHA loans in that project already. So if the project is 100 units and 11 people have FHA loans already in that project, we could not do a spot approval for another FHA buyer. So that's one scenario that comes up. Also, if it's one of those, usually if it has to be minimum of 4 units as well. So if it were one of those, like say, like a triple decker in Massachusetts, there they converted to condos. You couldn't do an FHA spot approval on one of those either. But if your buyer, is only in an FHA loan for, as a quote first time buyer program, because that's maybe what the lender had initially suggested for them, it may not be their only option. There are also conventional loan options where they can put down 3 or 5% towards the purchase price and still get a quote first time home buyer loan through Fannie Mae or through Freddie Mac instead of, as an FHA loan. Typically they do have to have a little bit stronger credit score requirements than FHA would. But there might be an alternative loan option for that buyer that could work.
Yeah, so I think, Romani, I think the two key things are try and figure out what markets are they looking in, what are the FHA approved condos in those markets, and really try and hone in and focus on those developments. And number 2 is get them to a lender to just double check the loan products and see if we can get them into conventional product with the same low money down. So I think those would be the 2 things that I would be focusing on. So,
Yeah, thank
great.
you.
You bet. I think he or she agrees. Well, listen, it's been an awesome week with you guys. Love doing these calls. Have yourselves a great weekend. Go put some deals together and let's talk about them on Monday. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great weekend,
Thanks, Steve. See ya.
everybody.